And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another, well, we'll call it mixed episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network covering IU women's basketball. This episode is our 136th episode, recorded on Monday, November 25th, 2024. I'm your host, Jeff Marlow, joined tonight by my co-host, Kathy Amos. And today we will be discussing your Indiana Hoosiers tournament in the Bahamas, the Battle for Atlantis. They started off on Saturday with a 72-62 win over Columbia, who was a tournament team last year, by the way. A 73-65 win over number 18 Baylor on Sunday. And then, unfortunately, today, a 69-39 loss to number 16 North Carolina, finishing as the runner-up in the Battle for Atlantis. This brings the record to 4-3. But we'll start this show as we do with our banner moment, every show with our every episode with our banner moment. And Kathy, I'm actually going to go back to that win over Baylor, because that was now the second top 25 win by this team after they lost two in a row to Harvard and to Butler. And by the way, Harvard's looking pretty good right now. If they can continue to keep playing the way they are, that loss is not going to look so bad at the end of the year, except it was at home. But so another top 25 win for the Hoosiers over Baylor yesterday. And then today we're going to talk about the Carolina game, but just kind of a lot of things today that didn't go well for the Hoosiers, obviously. Our banner moment is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, presenting sponsor of the Back Home Network, who includes the Assembly Call, Crimson Cast, X's and Joe's, and now the Dribble Drive. Home Field is constantly releasing new schools or updating their products for the schools in their existing line. You are bound to find something for you or anyone in your life, that just loves great collegiate gear. Not only do you get quality apparel, but you're supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelly School of Business. Go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME23, that's HOM23, to get 15% off your entire first order. That's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. Once again, the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. And in news around the program, I guess not a whole lot. I guess we would put in news that won't get discussed in the game. But over the course of the weekend, Chloe Moore McNeil jumped up to number 9 all time on the assist leaders. She's only 2 away from actually moving into number 8, so we'll pass that along. And also, I know it's early, and Indiana hasn't had the best start at 4-3. But going into today, Charlie Cream still had them as a number 9 seed in the NCAA tournament. So all is not lost. When I kind of started thinking about this morning, looking at Kathy, I was kind of like, man, I wonder if we're like first 4 in, first 4 out, last 4 in, first 4 out, that kind of thing. And he had us as a solid number 9. So I think that speaks to right now, their losses are not looking so bad. And so we'll throw it over to Kathy for the Amos angle.
Yeah. So hello, Jeff. Nice to see you on this Monday afternoon, getting colder here in Iowa. I don't know about you, but certainly was cold down in the Bahamas for our ladies with their shooting. But, overall, I would say that this was a pretty good tournament. The first 2 games, like you mentioned, especially the one yesterday against Baylor, were really good wins. That Columbia team, I think they're picked first to finished first in the Ivy League. Like you said, they were tournament team last year, and Jeff, I remember, I think they got in at large. I don't think they won their conference. So that rarely happens for the Ivy League to get an at-large bid. So the fact that Columbia had that, and I believe they have quite a few people coming back, says a lot about their team. And that was a good quality win, as was obviously the Baylor one. We know earlier this season as well that Oregon knocked off Baylor when they were ranked around 12th or so. So there was a good couple of quality wins, but boy, it was a tale of just a completely different team today, especially offensively. They just couldn't get anything going. Part of that, I'm sure, is Sydney being out and they weren't in their normal rotation. Jules Lamandula started in her place. But just in general, we saw the same kind of thing, I think, that we saw against Butler, where offensively, they're just really stagnant. The ball wasn't moving. They weren't setting picks. They got a little discombobulated a couple of times with a couple of people down low and just kind of clogging up the lane. So, but overall, unfortunately, I wasn't able to see the games on Saturday and Sunday, but they sounded like the ball was moving. And I think we'll get into each game a little bit different. But overall, what my thoughts are of this kind of tournament is that we're just really not too super consistent. We don't have, that McKenzie anymore, and no one is, or a Grace who we know night in and night out is going to be, kind of our leading scorer. And we saw that over the weekend where mostly Yarden was, but boy, we had Shea go off yesterday for 34 points. So for me, the tune, I think that we're taking away from this weekend, at least for me, is consistency. That's the kind of the word. They need to figure out their footing offensively and defensively, and then once they find it, how they can apply that footing consistently to their basketball play.
Yeah, and Kathy, we normally would talk kind of about pivotal plays here, but since we really didn't get a chance to see a lot, how about we just jump into some of the numbers here? And let's start. And I just kind of go overall. You mentioned one, and I want to get your thoughts a little bit. Again, we did not see much of the games. I did not see any of the three. I followed a little bit online with the live stats and as best I could. And in fact, it was interesting. The first game there was, at least on the IU website, and I couldn't find anything with Columbia for live stats. So I followed a little bit with ESPN and their live stats, but she played well in game one in terms of scoring. But after that, Yarden did not really score very well. And I think that's one of the things that we're starting to see a little bit is this team needs more than one person, but I think Yarden's supposed to be that person that they can rely on, and we're not getting that. And I think that also goes for Chloe. I want to kind of get your thought about both of those, because those are two vets who right now have to find a way to step up and be double-digit scorers on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I agree, Jeff. I mean, Yarden was on 2 of the 3 games. One game she had 7 points, if I remember right. Yeah, she had 7 points against Baylor. To be fair, she didn't need to score in that game. Shea ended up with 34 points in that game, and it just didn't seem like she could miss in that game. But yes, back to Yarden. And today, I was able to watch the game. I thought she was being pretty aggressive, but she was just like everyone else and really had gotten clamped down on by North Carolina's defense. So hat tip to North Carolina, by the way. They played really fantastic defense today and evidently had been the whole weekend. I think they held their opponents in the 30s all 3 games. So, we weren't an anomaly with North Carolina's defense being a buzzsaw for us, but no one could really, hit. We ended up 29% today. 15% from 3, and Yarden was 4 of 12. So she, tied Chloe. They were both actually 4 of 12 from the field. So, they were being aggressive in terms of looking for the shot, but nothing was going down. So how can we find a way then when we do run up to against these, elite athletic teams, how we can keep both of them, more engaged and more consistent. Again, back to my kind of one word, consistency. We're just not seeming to find it either individually with some of the players or as a team. We go and we put up 73 points against the number 18 Baylor. And the next day we could only put up 39 points against North Carolina. So, how can we find that consistency? And I think you're 100% right. I think it has to start with those two. I think Yarden and Chloe have to find a way to be consistent in what they're producing as well as how they're leading this team. So that's what I'd like to see from them more in leading both by, example, if you will, as well as leading by, vocal leaders and being those aggressive players on the floor. I saw glimpses of that from Yarden today. I still would like to see Chloe be a lot more aggressive. I think even when the commentators on the ESPN broadcast said the same thing, she's like, Chloe has just got to find a way to be more aggressive this year offensively in a consistent manner.
Yeah. And what about you? I'll throw it back to you right here. Is there any numbers that kind of overall that stood out to you before we get game specific?
No, I mean, I think, rebounding was something I was kind of trying to watch for today too. And I believe we out rebounded the Columbia and Baylor in both of those games. I'm trying to look quickly as I'm talking. Yep. 42 to 30 against Columbia. And then I guess we were 42-41 for Baylor, and then boy, today we just kind of turned around and couldn't rebound again, 47-31. So a lot just didn't go our way, but I thought, a couple of people kind of stood out to me in terms of rebounding, but especially today, Jules Lamandola. I thought coming in, starting for her first time, she was really aggressive, ended up with 11 rebounds for a team high. She was really aggressive on the glass. And so those are just a couple of things I was trying to either listen for or watch today was some of the rebounding. So for the most part, we did pretty well, I think, in that facet, at least, again, in the first two games. It's hard to say consistently or to say what kind of theme we had because today was such an outlier of the three games in terms of statistics. So not surprised we got out rebounded today, 31-47 either.
Well, we missed a whole lot more shots than they did for one.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of going to go look at the turnovers here. And I'm not trying to hit on this, but they averaged 17 turnovers in the three games. And again, this is not something we're used to, but I think we're going to have to kind of get used to this as being kind of the new normal, that at least for the short term, that we're going to have to live with these high teens is kind of being acceptable. And it wasn't turnovers today per se that beat them. I mean, we're going to talk about the game and stuff. So it wasn't as bad as the Butler or the Harvard game. And they actually played pretty well in the Stanford game in terms of not turning it over and such. But I think that's the thing that's getting hard for a lot of IU fans, especially us who've now been with the program in terms of doing this show for about 3+ years, is this is not what we're used to. We're used to the goal being 11 or 12 and being upset if it was 14 or 15. Now 17 or 19 is like, okay, we can live with that. And especially with where we were against Harvard and Butler. So that was a number that kind of, stuck out to me. And we were able to win the first two games. We were able to come in. And then, like I said, I will say this, it wasn't, if they'd had, today, I think it was today it was 16. 16 turnovers today. I know one was 16 turnovers, but if they'd lost by 4 or 5, maybe 8, I would be like, okay, turnovers cost you. When you're getting beat by 30, turnovers aren't the difference. And we'll get to that in a little bit later. Let's go back to the Columbia game, Kathy. Any specific stats, team or individual? I mean, we're just going to kind of cover quickly these games, but what do you got, team or individual here?
I think in that game in particular, I thought sounded to me that they were shooting the ball really well. I thought the ball sounded like they were moving a little bit better. They ended up with 16 assists with 26 made field goals, and they ended up shooting 45.6% from the field in that one. So, and we had 4 of our 5 starters ended up with double-digit points as well. The only outlier in there was Shea Chesky, who ended up with only 2. So, a little bit more balanced scoring to get to that 72 is kind of what stuck out to me in that game. I thought a couple people, 20-18 for Lily and Yarden, 10-10 for Chloe and Sydney. So to me, it just sounded like the offense was clicking a little bit better. And it didn't hurt that we hit 5 3-pointers, although it was took 18 to get there. So little mixed bag there in terms of shooting, much better from just overall field goal percentage in that game.
Yeah, and it was nice, obviously, to get Lexi Bargesser back this weekend. I think they were still limiting her minutes a little bit, and it really helped. And by the way, we will say this. We don't know anything officially about Sid. I didn't see anything released today anyway about Sid either, so we're still kind of – but it did not sound good from what we saw yesterday in terms of her injury, whether it may be an ankle or possibly a knee. We really aren't totally certain, but we don't think Sid's going to be back anytime soon, unfortunately. So getting Lexi back definitely helped with that. And so the one thing I was looking at, you're talking about shooting a little bit, and I'm going to kind of stay away from the individuals a little bit, but again, free throws, they shot 8, they were 15 of 21 at the free throw line, which was 71%, which again, maybe not the best percentage, but we've also seen this team over the last few years struggle at times at the free throw line in the 60%. And so, with that, they went 15 and 21, because that's going to come back to something I want to talk about for today's numbers, but I'll save that when we get to the Carolina game. But free throws was one that I was looking at. If 15 and 21, you can live with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we took 21 to only 5 for Columbia too, which is also the right way that you want to be in terms of on which side you want to be on. So 15 to 21, I'll take that any day, especially if the other team's only shooting 5 free throws total.
Right. So anything else on the numbers for Columbia?
No, nothing really that we haven't touched on already.
Okay. Do you want to do game ball and as we kind of go game by game here?
As we go. Yeah.
Okay.
However you want to do it. Your host.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do game ball here for Columbia, and I'll let you go first.
Okay. So for me, for Columbia, I ended up, and again, we're going off of what we're hearing, and I was listening to Austin on the play-by-play. So take that for what it's worth, as well as looking at stats. I ended up going with Yarden Garzon in this way. I know she wasn't the high points. You could look at Lily Meister as well as Chloe, I think, in that game in particular. But Yarden ended up playing 37 minutes. She went 5 of 12 from field and 3 of 7 3-point line, and made all of her three free throws. She also had a double-double, which was important to me too, because as I mentioned, I was looking a lot at rebounds. So she had 10 rebounds, all of them defensive, as well as 18 points. The thing I liked also about her play that day is she seemed to be, or at least sounded to me like she was pretty well under control, with only 2 turnovers and only 1 foul for her. So for me, I ended up giving Yarden my game ball.
Yeah, I'm going to go with you. I agree with on Yarden, just mainly because of the rebounds here. She had 18 points, 10 rebounds, throw in 3 assists, 2 blocks. So I thought about Lily here, but I thought Yarden just put up a little bit better stat line here and played 37 minutes. So I thought, obviously stayed on the floor, and as you mentioned, only had 1 foul. So we both are in agreement here on Yarden. I believe that's Yarden's second game ball.
That's right. That was her second. Yeah.
So anyway, all right. So let's go move on to the Grace Berger hardest worker, and I'm going to kind of go first here. To me, I went with Lily here. I just really felt like Lily had probably her best game of her career, because obviously she's playing more, but 20 points, 8 rebounds, and really, shot the ball well in 24 minutes. So I'm going to go with Lily here for my hardest worker.
Yeah, Jeff, that's who I had as well. 20 points, and it sounded like she was really a lot more aggressive and comfortable, and played 25 minutes. She did that on 10 to 15 shooting. So, she was our highest in terms of both makes as well as attempts. So, and almost 2 rebounds away from a double-double as well. That would have matched Yarden. So, it sounded to me like she really had a nice complete game that day. So hats off to Lily. I think she had a double-double earlier in the year, though. I think when we played Harvard, she had a double-double in that game. So she was getting close to her second one.
So is that Lily's first or second hardest worker?
First hardest worker. She had a game ball earlier in the year.
Okay. So I couldn't remember where we were with game ball and hardest worker. So those are our game ball and hardest worker for the Columbia game. Let's move on and talk a little bit go back to the notable numbers from the Baylor game, Kathy, and I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I think, again, like Baylor, you already touched on the turnovers in total. So that game, they had 18 turnovers, but the number just in total that stuck out to me, and it wasn't one-sided. It was just very differently called game than what we had heard the night before, as well as like even other games where the fouls were just mounting up on both teams. 25 fouls for Baylor, 27 for us. I know that we had, I had that backwards. 25 for us and 27 for Baylor. We had Jules foul out, Lamadola, and we had 3 other people with 4 fouls. They had 2 people foul out, and then another person with 4 fouls. So it was just a lot more tightly called game in that game, or they were just a lot more aggressive teams. I'm going to go with I think they just sounded again like what Austin was talking about, that they just were calling a lot more fouls and than what they had seen in the previous games called. So those are just some numbers that stuck out to me, because that ended up, really, I thought, hurting the flow of the game, what I could tell. 30 free throws for us and 26 for Baylor. So you had a combined 56 free throw shot between the two teams that really had to take the teams out of their rhythm too, and not knowing what they could or couldn't do when they were trying to play.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the free throw percentage, 87%. They were 26 of 30 and at the free throw line. In a game that you win by 8, they were plus 10 at the free throw line, because they made 26. Baylor made 16. Baylor was 16 of 26. So if Baylor had shot free throws a little better, this game would have really gone down to the wire even more so. The other number I was going to throw out here, and a little bit in the Columbia game too, but even in this game, bench points. We got at least double-digit points off the bench. We had 13 points off the bench. And if we're just getting at least something off the bench, then you're feeling better about that, about those 2 or 3 off the bench right now. And again, right now, depth, I think, is a big concern because and we don't know when Lene's coming back either. So right now, still kind of the rotation is about 7 or 8 people deep right now. And so anything you're getting off the bench is obviously a positive from that standpoint. Anything else on the Baylor game that you wanted to point
out? No, I don't. I don't think so. We talked about turnovers already. We talked about rebounding. It was pretty even in that game. We did shoot 37% from the field in that game too. Only 29% from 3. So I feel like the 3-point shooting is starting to be a consistent theme for us, where it's just, going to be lower than what we have seen in the past. So that is something to kind of keep an eye on to see if those shots start falling. In that particular game for Baylor, Yarden ended up 0 for 6 for 3. She was just really, really cold. 2 of 11 total from the floor, and ended up, to your point earlier, with only 7 points. We could have used a little more from her. Didn't need to, because I'm sure we'll talk about it in a minute. We had somebody else that just went crazy.
Well, but you still, but nobody else is in double figures. It was nice to have Shea play well, but you got to have a little bit more balance to it. And the other thing I'll point out here is you talked about the shooting in the Columbia game. Overall, this team is not shooting the way we think they're capable of. Now, at some point, when you're 7 games into the season, it's going to start being the pattern. And that's got to be a concern, because, again, today we'll get to the Carolina game. It was atrocious in the second half. And so I know we can make it, and we can make we can say the ball's sticking, we can say they're not moving, but at some point somebody's got to knock down shots, out of all that. And it's simply to say, well, they don't have Mac in the middle to draw attention. There's other teams that don't have All-American post players that find ways to knock down shots. And the guards right now, to a certain degree, the letdown of this team has been the guard play. And I think that's kind of the overall, and we're seeing it in the shooting more than anything. And so therefore, Kathy, let's move on to the game ball then for the Baylor game. I think we're both going to go with the same person here, but I'll let you go first.
Yeah, this one is probably the easiest of the 3 games, right? So Shea Chesky will just, wait, there's no reason for any suspense. She shot 9 of 16 from the field, 4 or 5 3-point line, 12 from 13 of the line, at the free throw line, and ended up with 34 points, and she played 39 minutes. Obviously she was a player. You could just kind of see it, or in our case, hear it from the beginning, where she just really seemed on fire, and the staff recognized that and kept her in that game.
Yeah, 39 minutes, as you said. And I'm going to go with Shea Chesky as well. What a shooting performance. And these were the kind of things we talked about her in the offseason coming in from Penn State, that she would have games like this where she could just go out and just fill it up. And I think what we're starting to see, and again, we didn't see the games, but from what we understand, this is the Shea Chesky who is not just a 3-point shooter. She is looking to put it on the floor and dribble, penetrate, and get to the mid-range or get to the rim. I think the one thing that we would maybe like to see out Shea, and I don't blame this on her per se, because nobody's hitting shots, I think we'd like to see her assist numbers up a little bit, get her to 3 or 4 assists a game to go with 20+ points and such. But you only get assists when other people hit shots, and right now there's not a lot of that going on. That's right. Shea, and I believe this is Shea's first game ball?
It is her first game ball. Yes.
So congratulations to Shea on her first game ball. I'll go first here on the hardest worker. Man, I kind of went back and forth on this one, Kathy. So we may have to get the workaholics involved here a little bit, but this was a tough one, because again, 2 or 3 people I was looking at, but they all 3 had turnover issues. And so I was like, does that outweigh? So I leaned here. I went with Chloe Moore McNeil, 7 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, and a steal, but she did have the 3 turnovers. But I just felt like the 10 rebounds were what we're going to put her over the top on the hardest worker here. I did think about Caroline Striplin, especially with 8 points, 7 rebounds, an assist, a steal, and a block, but she had 4 turnovers. So, and she had 4 turnovers in 23 minutes. Chloe's was 3 turnovers in 38 minutes. So I'm going to go with Chloe here for the hardest worker.
So, Jeff, those were the exact same two people that I had written down too as I was listening through the game. Caroline Strickland ended up playing 23 minutes more than Lily Meister. Lily ended up with only 17 minutes in that game. And it just sounded to me that Caroline was a little bit more in tune with what was going on in that game. And to your point, she had those 7 rebounds, but the 4 turnovers, it's one of those years. I think we're just going to, like you said earlier, we're going to have to be used to the team having higher turnovers. And that means that they're going to have higher individual ones. So usually that's one of my tiebreakers to look at as well. But Chloe Moore-McNeil was my second person, like you mentioned. She played 38 minutes, only 1 of 4 from 3-point land and only 2 of 8 shooting from the field. But she was still able to get those rebounds and the assists. And she also had a steal in that game. Right. So I ended up with Chloe Moore-McNeil as well. So that brought her to her second hardest worker award, I think, for this year. So,
all right.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about today's game. And I think the first number I'm going to look at, I didn't 39. Figure this out. What's that?
It's 39 total points.
Yeah, that, but I'm going to go to the second half, 5 for 24. All right. 5 for 24 shooting. That's under 20%. That's less than 1 out of, it's just over. Actually, I take it back. It's just over 20% for the second half. I don't care who you are. You're not winning very many games. You're not going to stay in very many games at the Division I college level, shooting 5 for 24, roughly 22%. If I'm doing math in my head here real well. So 5 for 24 from the field. They were 0 for 13 beyond the arc in the second half. Those are the two numbers that really popped out to me. This was a 6-point game at halftime.
Yeah, absolutely. 6 points. I had seen the score ahead of time, the final score, before I watched the game. So I knew what the final outcome was. But like I had texted you and I had told my husband as well, I said, I know the final outcome and I normally don't like watching games. I know the ending for, but I really wanted to see how the heck we got here. Like, how did we end up only getting 39 points? I thought that the Butler game I think it was Butler, when we only had 54 or 56 points, and we were saying there, and if you only are scoring in the low 50s, you're going to have a hard time beating anyone. Well, there's no way you're beating anyone scoring 39. And to your point, that second half in particular, it's 13 points, 7 points in the third quarter and 6 points in the fourth. You needed 13 points each quarter to be able to keep up with North Carolina the way they were able to put up the 3-pointers. So I just thought that they came out in that second half and were really flat. North Carolina came out, ramped up their defense, and we just got punched in the mouth right away in the beginning of that second half and just couldn't figure out a way how to, again, like I mentioned, and it's not necessarily an excuse, but North Carolina clamped down on defense. We couldn't figure out a way to get the ball movement. We couldn't figure out a way how to keep them from shooting a 3. And it was just a really bad combination coming right out. And I think by the first media timeout, I think we were gone from 6 down to 12. And by the end of that third quarter, I don't have the exact scores in my head, but they outscored us 22-7 in that third quarter. And that game was pretty much done after that third quarter. So it was just, again, a third quarter woes that, we've seen from time to time, but it was especially amped up today. So I think part of it too, they looked a little bit tired. Like I said, North Carolina just seemed to have more pep in their step, if you will. And I think to your point, we're getting really, really thin. Now, if you look at the box score, we played 11 people, but that was because we had a number of people getting in towards the end who only played a minute or 2 minutes here and there. But in terms of, meaningful minutes, we only played 7 players. And I think that's just going to catch up to us. And I wonder how much Lexi is still, recovering as well from her injury. You had Jules starting for the first time. She played 30 minutes. I don't know that she's ever played 30 minutes since she's been at Indiana. So I think that's probably part of it. I think the depth is catching up to us, but I think they're really going to have to figure out a way how to whenever they get into a game again where the defense is being ratcheted up on them, how they can find that consistent ball movement. And again, I think, like you said, Yarden and Chloe are going to have to be the two to step up, and they just didn't, either one of them today.
Yeah, and I will say this again. I did not watch the game, but looking at the stats, they ended up shooting 5 free throws for the game. But realistically, they shot 2 free throws through the first 3 quarters. How you got to me? That's aggressive. That exactly. That to me is all about aggressiveness. You're not being aggressive at trying to get to the rim. You're not being aggressive and trying to attack the defense at the offensive end. And so to go through 3 quarters of play and only shoot 2 free, it's not like Carolina's playing zone. This is a team that's going to get up on you and play you. And so that just boggled my mind when I saw that stat. And then the other stat that really kind of factored into this, points off turnovers, Carolina 21-5. And again, that a lot of our turnovers ended up being leading to points. So those were the 2 things I really that stuck out. You have anything else on numbers you want to look at?
No, I really don't. I don't know that there was any positive. I was trying to find some kind of positive number to talk about, and there just wasn't. I guess we were both even in fouls, 15 for us and 14 for them. But yeah, 16 turnovers, 1 block, 5 steals, 7 assists. It's just not good. The one big positive I do, and again, since I was lucky enough to have the time and ability to watch the game, Lexi's jumper looks good. So it's a small sample size, but it really does look a lot different from last year. And she ended up going 1 of 2 on the floor. And that 1 of 2, that one that she made was not a layup. It was a little nice mid-range jumper, and it looked really smooth and much different than last year. So that's my big positive from this game is I'm hoping, as Lexi continues her recovery, continues to add more minutes, she was looking fairly comfortable out on the floor, running the point at times. That's what I'm hoping will be able to help us, especially not knowing how long Sid's out. I think Sid being out probably played quite a bit of factor. Plus, it was again 3rd game in a row. People have been playing a lot of minutes.
Yep.
But I think Sid being out could be a pretty big blow for this team, Jeff. But what are your thoughts on that?
I don't think Sid's played her best basketball. I really don't. I think she struggled. But I do believe when you take a grad senior out of the mix here, it's going to hurt. And again, we already talked about, we don't know when Lexi's going to be given full go. Right now, our understanding, she's being basically limited on her minutes. Yep. She played 14 today. She played 10 against Columbia, and she played trying to find it here. Well, she did get 26 minutes against Baylor. So
that was maybe they went down.
Yeah, that might have been more out of necessity, and they really tried to limit her today. But I think if Sid's out long term, which we're fearful of, that they're going to have to figure something out. And again, the sooner, in my opinion, the sooner Lene could get back, the better in that situation. But we don't know her situation either. So with that, kudos to Carolina. They played to their ranking today, and then kind of watched maybe and thought, saw yesterday that what Indiana did to Baylor, when I thought Indiana came out and played their best half of basketball. Didn't really talk about that, but in terms of what we saw on numbers, they may have played their best half of basketball yesterday in that first half against Baylor. So small sample size in 7 games. So if you don't have any other numbers, I'll throw it to you and let you go first on the game ball.
This was a hard one. I did end up going with Yarden on this one. Not just, again, she was our one and only player that had double digits and points and just barely with 10. She had 5 rebounds. I didn't care for her 5 turnovers, but here's why I ended up giving it to her, Jeff. When we just got done talking about not getting to the free throw line and not being aggressive enough, what I saw as I was, watching the game, she was one of the few players that was trying to be aggressive and actually drive and go to the basket. Her shot just wasn't falling along with everyone else today. But in terms of what I saw from her from aggressiveness, that's what I was kind of looking for. And so for me, I ended up giving my game ball again to Yarden.
I'm going to go that way too. Even though you talk about her being aggressive, she didn't get to the free throw line though.
They weren't calling it today.
A lot of them didn't, to be fair. But, I went with you, just the 10 points, the 5 rebounds. She did have 2 steals. And so I thought at least she put some numbers in some of the other stat lines that some of the others weren't, in a game that did not go very well. Yep. So I will agree with you about Yarden on the game ball here. And that's now her third.
That's right. Her third. 3 out of the last 4. Yeah.
So she would be leading the way so far here on game balls.
That's
All
right.
right. So I'll throw it back to you then for the Grace Burger hardest worker for the Carolina game.
Yeah, this one was also hard for me. I ended up landing on Jules Lamandola. Why? A couple of reasons. One, congratulations to her. Not out of not because of the circumstances. Not happy about that, but she was tagged to start this game, and she had not started a game before. She came in and she gave 30 minutes. Now, didn't produce much offensively. She really struggled shooting the ball. Again, who did not? But what I really liked from her today was her rebounding. Led the team in rebounding with 11 rebounds out of our 31 that we had. So she had almost a full third of the rebounds for us. And so I just thought in general, she came out and she gave us her all from the beginning. There were some things she clearly needs to clean up. She's only a sophomore, and I just saw glimpses, I think, of what she might be able to do for us going down the road. But to me, she worked her butt off in those 30 minutes, and that's kind of what we're looking for, at least from my perspective, in the Grace Burger hardest worker. So I gave mine to Jules.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think Jules is one that will work her butt off. She plays aggressive and maybe sometimes over aggressively, which gets her in some foul trouble early on. But I'm going to go with you as well. I thought Jules with the 6 points, the 11 rebounds to lead the team. And I've always felt like she could provide that. I really do. I really felt like that's been her game to a certain degree. She needs to maybe get a little bit better offensively game for her. But I feel like if she can play that way on the defensive end, she had 10 defensive rebounds today. And so a team that only had 23. All right. So she had almost half the defensive rebounds herself. And so I really think Jules, I've been upfront about this on the show that I really think Lene has star written all over, but Jules is not going to be a permanent bench kid, in my opinion, over the course of her career. And the more you can get her in here and get her some time, the better off that this team is going to be. She also had a steal as well. So, and in 30 minutes, probably her most minutes ever as a Hoosier. So give Jules her first Grace Burger hardest worker of her career, probably.
Yeah, probably. Maybe one last year and some of the earlier games. I'm not sure. I don't have those numbers handy, but yeah, congratulations to her.
And so Kathy, why don't you update us on the numbers watch here with Chloe and Yarden?
Yeah, absolutely. So Chloe first. So we're watching her for both when she might reach 1,000 points and on how she's moving up the assist line totals. First on the points, she had a total of 10, 17, around 25 points total this weekend. So that now brought her new total up to 878. She's averaging right at 9 points per game this year. And so she needs 122 to reach that 1,000 mark. In terms of assist numbers, she started out the year 10th on the all-time assist list. So Jeff already mentioned it, that she's moved up to 9th. She did that in the Columbia game. And if she gets 2 more, she will surpass the next person for 8th place on that list. And then just a few more from that, she really could look to climb into that number 6 spot if, she keeps going with some of these assist numbers. Then with Yarden, she's moving up a little better here. She's averaging 14 points per game this year. She is now up to 811 points on the year. So she needs around 189 points to break that 1,000 barrier. We're also looking at her 3-pointers made. So she made 5 this weekend. She needs to get to 157 to move into the 10th spot. She is at 146 currently. So that is where we're at with our 2 ladies that we're watching in terms of especially getting to that 1,000 mark. I think we've only had around 31 players total that have ever made that 1,000 point career mark. And the fact that Yarden's actually knocking on the door as the junior, I think is pretty cool. So they could potentially become 32 and 33.
So there we update our numbers watch with those 2, Chloe Morton-McNeil and Yarden Garzone. Our upcoming games, I will want to remind you here, our next podcast actually will come up on Wednesday, December 4th. We will not have a post-game show after Maine, but we will be playing Maine on Sunday. That's a 2:00 Eastern time start, 1 Central. That game will be on BTN Plus. IU leads this series all time at 3-0. We won last year, we won the last matchup actually in Maine, 67-59. That was kind of what we referred to as the Mackenzie Holmes game. They went back up into Maine to play up in Portland. as McKenzie was from Maine. Maine comes in with it. Well, at this point, they're 2-3. They have a loss to Harvard, 83-41. So there is one common opponent. They'll have 2 more games though before they play us. They're struggling too. They're only averaging 54 points a game from the field while they're giving up 62. So defensively, they're pretty solid, but they're just having trouble scoring. They have 3 players averaging in double figures: Caroline Bornman at 12.2, Sarah Talon at 12, and Paula Gallego at 10.8. And Bornman also leads them in rebounds at 8.6. And then Kathy, why don't you talk about the next opponent, Southern Indiana?
Yep. Yeah. So after we play Maine at home, we will have Southern Indiana coming in to play us. That game will be on Wednesday, December 4th. It's at 7 Eastern or 6 Central, also on Big Ten Plus. At least unless I couldn't find it on the IU Hoosiers website, the teams have actually never played each other, which I was kind of surprised. I would have thought at some point in our history, those 2 teams would have met up at some point, but we have never played Southern Indiana. They are coming in with at least right now a 5-1 record. They have 1 loss to Louisville, who they lost to 51-75. Interesting, before that game on the 4th, they are going to be heading to Puerto Rico for 2 games before they play us. So they'll get a little bit of warmth, I'm guessing, over the holiday weekend here coming up. A little different than Maine. They are averaging 77.8 points per game and only giving up 62 points per game. So this might be an interesting one to kind of keep an eye on. Now, I didn't look too carefully at their 5 wins, who they've played. But the fact that they're able to put up that kind of production and keep their opponents low scoring might be something to kind of keep an eye on. They have 4 players averaging double figures. Meredith Rayleigh at 13.3, Allie Saunders at 13, Vanessa Shafford at 12.2. Shafford is also leading the team in rebounds at 5.7. And then Trinity Ralston is averaging 10.6.
And then quickly around the Big Ten, Nebraska in a rivalry game lost to Creighton 80-74. These are all since our last podcast, so we're covering a little bit of time here. Number 3 USC lost to number 6 Notre Dame 74-61. That game was in Los Angeles. And then big game over the weekend was yesterday, and now is the new number 1 actually. UCLA was number 5, took out number 1 South Carolina 77-62. Dawn Staley said that they ran into a buzzsaw yesterday in Palo Alto, or excuse me, in Pauley Pavilion, and UCLA then bumped up today to be the new number 1 team in the nation. Some games coming up to keep an eye on. Again, a lot of teams playing in tournaments still this weekend, or invites, whatever you want to call them. Indiana gets a little bit of time off since they played in one of the earlier ones, but number 7 LSU will play Washington today. Michigan State plays an undefeated Cal team tomorrow. And I'm kind of looking forward to, kind of looking to see how that game plays out. And then and big game on Wednesday, number 22 Illinois plays number 15 Kentucky. So those are just some of the games that we have coming up. I didn't go too far into next week, but some of the games that we want to keep an eye on as we go around the Big Ten. And then with that, Rutgers, we talked about in our chat with Ari that they lost to Princeton the other day. So that's, with that. So just, again, still early, but obviously the Big Ten is going to be very top heavy. And especially when it shakes out. But I think a couple surprise teams, Kathy, around the Big Ten right now, Oregon being one, and also to a certain degree, not that I would say a surprise, but maybe actually playing up to expectations, Illinois.
Yeah. Yeah, the surprise on that list to me were a couple of them. The Nebraska loss to Creighton. I really thought I can't remember. I think that was in Omaha, so I know it was on the road, but I still expected Nebraska to kind of handle that one with all their veteran players. I thought USC and Notre Dame would be closer. I didn't get to watch the game, so I don't really know, and I was only following the score in the second half. But at least by the second half, when I started looking at it, Notre Dame had that game pretty well in hand, it looked like. And in fact, that score made it look closer than it really was. At one point, they were up by like 18 points or 20 points or so. So I was a little surprised USC didn't have a better fight against Notre Dame. But UCLA, to your point, they seem to be just rolling. So I really want to, hopefully I can catch a game of theirs here soon because I haven't had a chance to watch them play this year. So yeah, they're rolling right now.
In all honesty, in that game alone, Hidalgo from Notre Dame looked like the better player than Juju Watkins.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I had read too when I read the recap. Did you get to watch any of that game?
I watched a little bit of it, and I kind of went away from it just because, like you said, I was kind of hoping USC would win just because being for the help the Big Ten a little bit. But Notre Dame really played, really was kind of in control for a big chunk of that game. I picked it up, I think, just after halftime.
Yeah.
And they were really in control. So, Kathy, I'll throw it over to you really quick for final thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, again, we kind of have a mixed bag here in this tournament, but we went down, we won our first two, and we got to the championship game. Yep. We beat another ranked team, and that's something we got to remember. It's probably hard for us, recency bias, not to put all of our thoughts on this game today against North Carolina, and rightfully so. A 30-point loss, only putting up 39 points, it could be very easy to dwell on that. But we also have to remember, we just played a very quality team yesterday with Baylor. And we did lose Sydney in that game, but we only had her for 12 minutes. She only played 12. So we can't, chalk all of today up to Sydney. But I think we need to grasp on the fact that we're just going to be a very roller coaster team, to your point, not just with turnovers, but I think with consistency in play, consistency in production. And I think that's just something, it's hard for us as Indiana fans after the last 5-6 years to get our head around that we're just not going to be necessarily the cream of the crop this year. But one thing I think that I did see in this game, they may not have been executing well, but they all played with a lot of emotion and a lot of grit. And so even though the results were not there today, I think the other two games we saw earlier in the year or earlier in the weekend gives us something again, just to remind ourselves, don't dwell on just what just happened, and have faith in Coach Moore and in the staff and the players that they'll continue to make adjustments. And I think that we'll still see some great success from them. And to your point, Charlie Cream is still having them in the field. So that ultimately is always a great goal to have this year. So overall, I think, throw today away, learn from it, flush it, move on, but really let's look at what they did well in the first two games and start building on that.
Yeah, and I think we would have said at the beginning of the season when we did our prediction show, 2-1 in the Bahamas was what we want. Win the first game, yep, but at least finish 2-1 minimum. They did that. The thing that's throwing this fan base a little bit for the loop are the Harvard and the Butler game. If you win one or both of those games, then I don't think you're quite as upset where you are. If you're 5-2 or 6-1, I don't think the fan base is quite as, as concerned, but I get it. And now we need to win these next two games. We need win these next two, get to 6-3 before you head into conference play with that game against Penn State early in December, and then go from there. And then you'll get a couple more non-conference games. So let's find a way to get to maybe 8-3, 9-3 before we get, into the beef of the meat of the Big Ten schedule. So, but I thought overall, you got to chalk this weekend up as being a success. We said 2-1. Yeah. You didn't like the way you lost today. Didn't like losing by 30. Yeah. Yes. Didn't like that. Didn't like the fact that you only scored 39 points, but let's kind of remember 2-1 was what we wanted to be, and 2-1 winning the first game, not losing the first game and then being on the loser side of the bracket. You won the first game. You got to the championship. You gave yourself a chance to win the whole thing. Just couldn't get it pulled off today. So I think we're at least starting to see, again, let's kind of take today as again, wasn't good, wasn't fun, but I think we're starting to see this team at least move one step forward rather than a step forward, two back. We're starting to see just a step forward, or at least 2 steps forward and a half step back. And that's where we want to see right now. And then again, just got to try and get some of these individuals, get some of this depth worked out. And I think Coach Moore also has to make a decision about a couple of these kids about, I know she's right now, it's always been about trust on the defensive end, but 7 people at this point in the season, they got to find a way, whether it's Faith Wiseman or somebody else, to at least be like, hey, you got to give us 5 or 6 minutes a night. And with that. So that'd be kind of my final thought.
Yeah.
All right, so coming up next, we'll return, as we said earlier, on Wednesday, December 4th, after the Southern Indiana game, to discuss that game as well as the main game. We will not have a live post-game show after the main game, but we will be live after the Southern Indiana game. If you want to see us do the show live and be a part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@BackHomeNetwork. Again, youtube.com/@BackHomeNetwork. You can be a part of our private community as well. Find out more at assemblycall.substack.com. Special thanks to John Ringer of Rig Designs for designing our logos. Also, a big thank you to Bob Thompson for our music that you heard throughout the broadcast. And want to thank all of you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you on Wednesday, December the 4th after the Southern Indiana game. Until then, keep your elbow in, your eyes on the rim, and let's go Hoosiers.
All right.
And let's go football.
Not too bad. We covered 3 games off and previews and around the Big Ten in 49 minutes. So we were efficient.
Yes, we
Good
were.
job.
Yes, we were.
I think it's the margin. I think the margin of that game today that's sticking with you, sticking with people. At least it is for me. It's hard to overlook a 39-point game and not, especially after that Butler game when we only had 54, 56 and not start to get a little concerned about our offensive production. So, but anyway,
so everybody root football on. Hopefully we'll get the football poll to playoff ranking tomorrow and still be inside the top 10 or 11. I don't think you want to be number 12 and be knocked out because the Big 12 is not going to be inside the top 12. They automatically get a spot. So you want the team to be, and the AP poll and the coaches poll, they were number 10. So I'm hopeful that they won't fall below 10 or 11 and they'll stay inside the playoff and then get the bucket. Win the bucket on Saturday. I will be there. It's a night game. This is going to be a chilly bucket game. The high is only supposed to be for the day is only supposed to be around 27. And so by the time we get to the evening, it's going to be a chilly evening of IU football and bucket for the bucket game. But hopefully it'll be a lot to celebrate on that. We certainly don't want to have that. So Kathy, enjoyed the show as always with you, but I'll let you go. Like we were talking, 50 minutes and we're out of here.
You enjoy freezing your butt off. I will be down in Cabo with some friends, so I will not be freezing my butt off.
You're killing me, Kathy.
I know. Feel bad for me. So yes, I know. Got to win that bucket game, and we got to do it decisively. We cannot let Purdue come in and spoil this year at all. I mean, we never want them to come in but boy, they have to be ready for this game and turn some of their offensive woes around and do it against a Purdue game. Go win by 24, 25 points. Let's do it.
So, all right. Hey, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Night, Mom.
See ya.
See ya.